Well, the Asia stocks traded mixed as US equities did come under some pressure. The 10-year yield in US did further ease to nearly around 1.61%, and also we did see a slight bump up in terms of the oil prices. Speaking about the US equities, if you look at the Dow Jones, well, the Dow Jones closed negative late in the session as investors focused on rebounding oil prices, some slippage in the Treasury yields, of course, and a brighter outlook for the overall US economy. The S&P 500 gave up its earlier gains and closed in the red on Wednesday. We also did see technology stocks selling off in the trade on account of market rotation of out of the high-flying growth names. In fact, the S&P 500 fell 0.6% to 3889 after rising as much as 0.8%, while the Nasdaq dropped 2% to 12,961, closing at its session low. Dow Jones also dipped in the red in the final seconds of the session. The blue chip benchmark index, in fact, had jumped nearly around 300 points of the session high earlier. The 10-year yield also did dip further by nearly around 3 bips to 1.61%, falling for a third day in a row after the rate hit a 14-month high just in the last week itself. Do recall that just in the last week, the 10-year yield had jumped to nearly around 1.73% itself. In Europe, the European stocks were fairly subdued on Wednesday as concerns about the new lockdown measures overshadowed a surprise return to economic growth for the Eurozone in March. In fact, after falling as much as 0.7% earlier in the day, the Pan-European Stock 600 index ended flat on the back of strong positive PMI data. The European benchmark indices has pulled away from its one-year peak last week after major economies like Germany as well as France have imposed new lockdowns. And do note that new lockdowns and the rise in COVID cases have again emerged as a risk globally as well as back home in India. FTSE and CAC were up 0.2% and nearly around 0.03% respectively, while DAX was negative by 0.3%. In Asia, the stocks traded mixed out of the companies that benefited from the pandemic dragged down the overall US equities. So yes, Asian equity markets are coming under slight pressure on the back of some amount of sell-off in US equities. Nikkei index was up 0.7%, while Topix was up by 1.3% in the early morning trade. Australia, however, did trade positive by close to around 0.3%. Oil did rebound slightly back to over $60 per barrel. WTI crude is trading about $60 per barrel, having added more than 5% on Wednesday. In fact, if you look at the WTI US crude futures, that was trading down by 1% at $60.5 per barrel in early morning trade. Tugs and Dickers have so far failed to dislodge the ship that ran around Suez Canal for the second consecutive day. Brent closed up by 5.6% to close at $64 per barrel odd, with the WTI crude was up by nearly around 5.9%. Gold also strengthened by close to around 0.4% to $1733 an ounce, and gold futures traded flat at around $1733 an ounce.